Hey everyone, welcome back to Hands On Books. If this is your first time here, it's a show where we open books mostly used at random from a big pile that I have here. And if this turns out to be something you like, feel free to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. It would help me grow the channel. And let's get started. All right. So I actually know what this one is, and I couldn't wait to open it at random. So this is Between Epic and Dream, a collection of paintings by Gustave Moreau. I can't remember how I found out about Gustave Moreau, but his paintings are just, I've never really gotten a book like this, but his paintings really, some of them absolutely blew me away, just the detail and complexity of what he does. Let me read the preface and a little bit of the introduction. Gustave Moreau occupies a singular place in the history of French art. If one sees in his works the heritage of Romanticism, one must also recall that the artist was the contemporary of realist painters Gustave Courbet and Edouard Manet, and that he lived in Paris during the time of the Impressionist Revolution. Unconcerned with glory, in self-imposed isolation, Moreau seems to have constructed a refined universe, based solely upon his reading and reveries. "All that I have sought," he wrote, "I have found, in small proportions, no doubt, but in forms perfectly pure and flawless. For I have never looked for dream in reality or for reality in dream. I have allowed my imagination free play, and I have not been led astray by it." Nevertheless, one should not forget that Moreau, as the teacher of Henri Matisse and Georges Rouault, was the involuntary initiator of Fauvinism, or that the Surrealists recognized in him a remarkable precursor, or that he executed for himself, in the seclusion of his atelier, some quasi-abstract sketches that are still surprising today. Master of symbolism avant la lettre, Gustave Moreau now seems more modern than ever before. More than 35 years after the large retrospective edition held at the Musée du Louvre, Paris, it has become necessary to revisit this work, which can strike late 20th century viewers as paradoxical, entailing as it does an imaginative repertoire that invokes the past while announcing, with highly refined means, the future. Was not this also said of Stéphane Mallarmé, another prodigious innovator who, like Moreau, celebrated throughout his career the poisonous charms of Salome? And that was by three directors of different museums that I guess contributed to this book: Francois Cachin, Philippe de Montebello, and James N. Wood. Yeah, I don't really know that much about art history and stuff like that, but I plan to kind of use this. If I ever get stuck trying to describe a setting or a character or what they're wearing, it always seems like I could flip through one of his books and just find an infinite number of ideas, because his work just is so, it's almost like fractal. You can keep drilling down on it and find more details to draw upon. Let me keep reading. From the introduction. Magician, master sorcerer, and poet to those who had adulated him during his lifetime, the painter Gustave Moreau, anxious, uneasy, and sensitive, yet sure of himself, took the precaution of leaving for posterity everything that might make it possible to ascertain the sum of the artist's work and efforts during his lifetime. A century after his death, and 86 years after the opening of the museum conceived by him in his enlarged residence at 14 Rue de la Rochefoucauld in Paris, the immense collection of more than 14,000 works that he bequeathed to the state is gradually revealing its riches. The Musée Gustave Moreau, unlike other single artist museums that display selections of completed masterpieces, offers us a glimpse into a working studio, complete with sketches, models, unfinished paintings, inventories, letters, and an extensive library to which the artist referred constantly. The 6,000 works described in published catalogs and exhibited in the rooms of the house constitute only a portion of the museum's holdings, although they certainly must be remembered among the most spectacular ones. All right, let's check out some of the paintings. I don't want to read more of this. I'll read a little bit of this. Gustave Moreau and the Italian Renaissance. Although the art of Gustave Moreau appears curiously isolated and idiosyncratic against the backdrop of realist and impressionist painting, it was, in Moreau's mind and in reality, reverently dependent on artistic tradition. Moreau himself wrote that the challenge for the artist is to coordinate, quote, all that the preceding ages have brought to us, to make visible how our century has accepted this heritage and how it makes use of it. For Moreau, assimilation of this inheritance involves studying and copying the art of various periods, ranging from ancient Roman murals to paintings by Eugène Delacroix, and including the works of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, Nicolas Poussin, and Rembrandt van Rijn. Yet the artists that seem to have exerted the most profound and lasting influence on him were the Renaissance masters, whose works he viewed in the Musée du Louvre and during an extended stay in Italy, from October 1857 until September 1859. Accompanied by the young Edgar Degas during much of this Italian sojourn, Moreau made hundreds of copies of the paintings and drawings that he saw in Rome, Florence, Milan, Venice, Pisa, Siena, and Naples. While he clearly developed a predilection for the works of the Venetian painters, particularly the 15th century master Vittore Carpaccio, Moreau was, by his own admission, most affected by the paintings and sculpture of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Moreau spent months in the Sistine Chapel copying Michelangelo's frescoes and evidently sought out Leonardo's paintings and drawings with similar enthusiasm. Later in life, Moreau would refer directly to these sources of inspiration for his art. Quote, "It is thanks to this continual meditation that I manage to express, without one's realizing it, but in a striking way, the je ne sais quoi exuded by great works of genius, the Sistine and certain works by Leonardo." All right, let's keep going. Here, yeah, just the detail on this character's clothes. The ribbon in the hair. These sort of vague backgrounds that still like have some form, I guess. I'm trying to find the big one. I remember the first time I looked up Gustave Moreau, this painting, Jupiter and Semele, which is probably, if you've only seen one of his paintings, it's probably this one. But this just absolutely blew me away. And this is a depiction of, I guess, the birth of Dionysus. But there's so much going on. It's like everywhere you look, you can find like a different story being played out. And it's like this kind of picture that I would really like to be able to write, if that makes any sense. So let's read a little bit about this one. In 1906, Robert de Montesquieu, who left precious first-hand accounts of the last 15 years of Moreau's life, described Jupiter and Semele as a work long considered, often modified, completed by him in the final years of his life. This painting that, moreover, was never publicly exhibited, was little understood by the privileged few individuals who saw it, and still less by the critics who interpreted it. The author, who took it to be his most singular work, was mutely irritated by this. One wonders whether the patron himself, despite the commentary that Moreau prepared for him, did not find the painting too complicated. Indeed, whether this might not be the reason he offered to lend it to the Musée Gustave Moreau from the moment it opened, an offer transformed into a gift at the request of the Administrative Commission. Skipping ahead here, he drew it from mythology, no doubt referring to the 1660 edition of Ovid's Metamorphoses that was ready to hand in his atelier. The tale of Semele, granddaughter of Agenor and daughter of Hermione and Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, is told in the third fable of Book 3, entitled, I'm not even going to try to read that, of Semele burned by lightning, and of Bacchus enclosed within the thigh of Jupiter. All right, I was going to try to read about the painting, but I think I just want to find more paintings. So let's keep going. Yeah, his faces always look so crazy, especially the faces of, like, gods. They're, like, immutable, unfeeling kind of faces. Powerful, though. Sort of like a more medieval one here. But then you look back here and the clothing and the crown are just super detailed, and this cool castle in the background. I love it. This one's at sunrise or sunset. And this, like, decorated lyre of some sort. Oh yeah, this one, the triumph of Alexander the Great. So sick. Alexander's on this huge throne. It's like super detailed castle, all these little people. Everywhere you look, more detail. Interesting. The trees in the background and the landscape are more detailed than the characters. All right, I'm going to find one more and then let's go to the next book. Here's one. A lady with the head of Orpheus. You look, there's a city on a river back here. It's like a mountains through a cave and guys playing flutes up here. Turtles. Never seen this one before. Bathsheba. All right, well, love it, but we got to keep moving. Spend too much time on this book. Let's go to the next one. All right. It's hard to know what to talk about with an art book because I really don't know anything about art history, I guess, or how to contextualize that sort of subject. Oh, cool. So this is the collected poems and plays of Rabindranath Tagore. I ordered this a long time ago. Let's check it out. Note from 1980, from Santa Fe. Tagore's winning of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913 brought the famous poet of India to the attention of America, and ever since then his books have found wide favor in this country. Here are his poems and plays: Gitanjali, The Crescent Moon, The Gardener, Chitra, Fruit Gathering, The Post Office, Lover's Gift, Crossing, Stray Birds, The Cycle of Spring, The Fugitive, Sacrifice, and so forth. There is an index to first lines which is invaluable to the person who knows and loves the poems. Tagore's poetry is a deep mystical quality, exquisite music, and a wise philosophy. Here, perhaps more than in any other poet of our age, is the profound to be found in the simple. In his plays there is no striving after stage effects, no bid for a curtain, no holding up of the moment of suspense with which we are so familiar on the American stage. Tagore attains the naturalness of style, the fluidity of movement of the drama of the open air and courtyard. And nice little hardback. I think I got into this guy, or wanted to check him out, because reading about Sri Ramakrishna and the whole Bengali Renaissance period, his name came up in the sense that I think some of his older family members, maybe his dad or grandfather, was interacting with Ramakrishna in the context of like the Brahmo Samaj, I think, but I can't remember. Before we read this, let me see if there's something on the back. Okay, let me read about the author. Sir Rabindranath Tagore, the soft-spoken, gentle man who emerged as one of India's most beloved figures, was born in Calcutta in 1861. His first poems were published when he was 15, followed by some of the most beautifully mystic poetry and music the world had yet to hear. Tagore received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, was given 4 honorary doctorates from Indian universities, and knighted by the British. In 1901, he had founded a school, Visva Bharati, in Bengal, which became an international institute. Completely devoted to the school, he lived there and donated his entire Nobel Prize award money and all the proceeds of his lectures to its growth. 12 years before his death, in 1941, he began painting and exhibited in Moscow, Berlin, Munich, Paris, and New York. 3,000 songs, 100,000 lines of poetry, and innumerable plays, novels, and short stories attest his love for man and nature. Wow, that's incredible. True polymath. So let's read the beginning of this one, Gitanjali. I've never heard of any of these, so sorry if I butcher all of the words. Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou hast emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and hast breathed through it melodies eternally new. At the immortal touch of thy hands my little heart loses its limits in joy and gives birth to utterance ineffable. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill. Part 2. When thou commandest me to sing, it seems that my heart would break with pride. And I look to thy face, and tears come to my eyes. All that is harsh and dissonant in my life melts into one sweet harmony, and my adoration spreads wings like a glad bird on its flight across the sea. I know thou takest pleasure in my singing. I know that only as a singer I come before thy presence. I touch by the edge of the far-spreading wing of my song thy feet which I could never aspire to reach. Drunk with the joy of singing, I forgot myself and call thee friend, who art my Lord. And one more section and I'll flip to another one. I know not how thou singest, my master. I ever listen in silent amazement. The light of thy music illumines the world. The life breath of thy music runs from sky to sky. The holy stream of thy music breaks through all stony obstacles and rushes on. My heart longs to join in thy song, but vainly struggles for a voice. I would speak, but speech breaks not into song, and I cry out baffled. Ah, thou hast made my heart captive in the endless meshes of thy music, my master. Very cool. And try the beginning of the crescent moon, page 39. The home. I paced alone on the road across the field while the sunset was hiding its last gold like a miser. Great line. The daylight sank deeper and deeper into the darkness, and the widowed land, whose harvest had been reaped, lay silent. Suddenly a boy's shrill voice rose into the air. He traversed the dark unseen, leaving the track of his song across the hush of the evening. His village home lay there at the end of the wasteland, beyond the sugarcane field, hidden among the shadows of the banana and the slender areca palm, the coconut and the dark green jackfruit trees. I stopped for a moment in my lonely way under the starlight, and saw spread before me the darkened earth surrounding with her arms countless homes furnished with cradles and beds, mothers' hearts and evening lamps, and young lives glad with a gladness that knows nothing of its value for the world. Beautiful. On the seashore. On the seashore of endless worlds, children meet. The infinite sky is motionless overhead, and the restless water is boisterous. On the seashore of endless worlds, the children meet with shouts and dances. They build their houses with sand, and they play with empty shells. With withered leaves they weave their boats and smilingly float them on the vast deep. Children have their play on the seashore of worlds. They know not how to swim. They know not how to cast nets. Pearl fishers dive for pearls. Merchants sail in their ships, while children gather pebbles and scatter them again. They seek not for hidden treasures. They know not how to cast nets. The sea surges up with laughter, and pale gleams the smile of the sea beach. Death-dealing waves sing meaningless ballads to the children, even like a mother while rocking her baby's cradle. The sea plays with children, and pale gleams the smile of the sea beach. On the seashore of endless worlds, children meet. Tempest roams in the pathless sky. Ships are wrecked in the trackless water. Death is abroad, and children play. On the seashore of endless worlds is the great meeting of children. Kind of like stunning writing. I definitely like the second selection a little bit more than the beginning of the first one. The beginning. "Where have I come from? Where did you pick me up?" the baby asked its mother. She answered, half crying, half laughing, and clasping the baby to her breast. "You were hidden in my heart as its desire, my darling. You were in the dolls of my childhood's games, and when with clay I made the image of my God every morning, I made and unmade you then." Beautiful. "You were enshrined with our household deity. In his worship I worshipped you. In all my hopes and my loves, in my life, in the life of my mother you have lived. In the lap of the deathless spirit who rules our home you have been nursed for ages. When in girlhood my heart was opening its petals, you hovered as a fragrance about it. Your tender softness bloomed in my youthful limbs, like a glow in the sky before the sunrise. Heaven's first darling, twin-born with the morning light, you have floated down the stream of the world's life, and at last you have stranded on my heart. As I gaze on your face, mystery overwhelms me. You who belong to all have become mine. For fear of losing you, I hold you tight to my breast. What magic has snared the world's treasure in these slender arms of mine?" Love it. Read one more and I'll go to the next one. The astronomer. I only said, "When in the evening the round full moon gets entangled among the branches of the kadam tree, couldn't somebody catch it?" But Dada, elder brother, laughed at me and said, "Baby, you are the silliest child I have ever known. The moon is ever so far from us. How could anybody catch it?" I said, "Dada, how foolish you are. When mother looks out of her window and smiles down at us playing, would you call her far away? Still, Dada said, "You are a stupid child. But, baby, where could you find a net big enough to catch the moon with?" I said, "Surely you could catch it with your hands." But Dada laughed and said, "You are the silliest child I have known. If it came nearer, you would see how big the moon is." I said, "Dada, what nonsense they teach you at your school. When mother bends down her face to kiss us, does her face look very big?" But still, Dada says, "You are a stupid child." All right, I don't want to end on that one. Fairyland. If people came to know where my king's palace is, it would vanish into the air. The walls are of white silver and the roof of shining gold. The queen lives in a palace with 7 courtyards, and she wears a jewel that cost me all the wealth of 7 kingdoms. But let me tell you, mother, in a whisper, where my king's palace is. It is at the corner of our terrace where the pot of the tulsi plant stands. The princess lies sleeping on the faraway shore of the 7 impassable seas. There is none in the world who can find her but myself. She has bracelets on her arms and pearl drops in her ears. Her hair sweeps down upon the floor. She will wake when I touch her with my magic wand, and jewels will fall from her lips when she smiles. But let me whisper in your ear, mother. She is there in the corner of our terrace where the pot of the tulsi plant stands. When it is time for you to go to the river for your bath, step up to that terrace on the roof. I sit in the corner where the shadows of the walls meet together. Only Puss is allowed to come with me, for she knows where the barber in the story lives. But let me whisper, mother, in your ear where the barber in the story lives. It is at the corner of the terrace where the pot of the tulsi plant stands. Super interesting stuff. Love this. Oh yeah, this one. Smells great. How old is this? 1977, 17th printing. Yeah, I had forgotten that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. Just seems like a super impressive guy. Okay, anyway, let's go to the next one. Thank you. Last one for the day. Oh, awesome. Tales of Nevèrÿon by Samuel R. Delany. One of my favorite science fiction authors. I guess the only thing I've really read by him is Trouble on Triton, but it's so good that I've read some of his books on writing in general, and I also read Nova by him, which is awesome. So I wanted to read some fantasy. I didn't even know he wrote fantasy until I found this book. Nevèrÿon. A barbarous alien empire ruled by primal brutality, intrigue, and fear. A world of bizarre paradoxes, powerful mysteries, and sexual abandon. The world of Gorgic, a thick-hewn mind-slave whose prowess defies the mighty. Lady Mirgo, who takes him as a plaything to Nevèrÿon's imperial court. Small Sarg, Gorgic's princely lover. Norima, the island girl clad in shimmering secrets, and her companion, Raven, masked woman warrior. Cool. This looks like in perfect condition. So even at this time, oh yeah, it's probably most famous for Dahlgren, which I've never read. But yeah, even at this time, he'd won 4 Nebulas. Nova's great too, but Trouble on Triton is fantastic. here going just by maybe the first title was just Triton. So looks like this is from 1979. Smells great. Seems like it's never been read. And let's go ahead and read this epigraph real quick. And if the assumption of responsibility for one's own discourse leads to the conclusion that all conclusions are genuinely provisional and therefore inconclusive, that all origins are similarly unoriginal, that responsibility itself must cohabit with frivolity, this need not be a cause for gloom. Derrida, then, is asking us to change certain habits of mind. The authority of the text is provisional. The origin is a trace, contradicting logic. We must learn to use and erase our language at the same time. If one is always bound by one's perspective, one can at least deliberately reverse perspectives as often as possible, in the process undoing opposed perspectives, showing that the two terms of an opposition are merely accomplices of each other. The notion that the setting up of unitary opposites is an instrument and a consequence of making equal, and the dissolving of opposites is the philosopher's gesture against that will to power which would mystify her very self. And that is by Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. Translator's Introduction of Grammatology, which is Derrida. All right, let's get into the story a little bit. Oh, another epigraph. Part 1, The Tale of Gorgic. Because we must deal with the unknown, whose nature is by definition speculative and outside the flowing chain of language, whatever we make of it will be no more than probability and no less than error. The awareness of possible error in speculation and of a continued speculation regardless of error is an event in the history of modern rationalism whose importance, I think, cannot be overemphasized. Nevertheless, the subject of how and when we become certain that what we are doing is quite possibly wrong, but at least a beginning, has to be studied in its full historical and intellectual richness. And that's Edward Said, Beginnings, Intention, and Method. Here we go. Chapter 1. His mother from time to time claimed Eastern connections with one of the great families of fisherwomen in the Ulvain Islands. She had the eyes, but not the hair. His father was a sailor who, after a hip injury at sea, had fixed himself to the port of Kolhari, where he worked as a waterfront dispatcher for a wealthier importer. So Gorgic grew up in the greatest of Nevèrÿon. I'm just going to say it like Nevèrÿon. That seems like the best. So Gorgic grew up in the greatest of Nevèrÿon ports, his youth along the docks substantially rougher than his parents would have liked, and peppered with more trouble than they thought they could bear, though not so rough or troubled as some of his friends. He was neither killed by accidental deviltry nor arrested. Childhood in Kolhari? Somehow, soldiers and sailors from the breadth of Nevèrÿon ambled and shouted all through it, up and down the old pave. See, I wonder if he puts these accents on the names just to get you like involved in the story. I kind of like it and I don't like it at the same time. Merchants and merchants' wives strolled on Black Avenue, so called for its topping that, on hot days, softened under the sandals, travelers and tradesmen met to chat in front of dockside inns, the Sump, the Kraken, the Dive, and above them all slipped the male and female slaves. And among them all slipped the male and female slaves, those of aristocratic masters dressed more elegantly than many merchants, while others were so ragged and dirty their sex was indistinguishable. Yet all with the hinged iron collars above fine or frayed shirt necks or bony shoulders, loose or tight around stringy or fleshy necks, and sometimes even hidden under jeweled neck pieces of damasked cloth set with beryls and tourmalines. What a sentence that was. Frequently this double memory returned to Gorgic. Leaving a room where a lot of coins, some stacked, some scattered, lay on sheets of written-over parchment, to enter the storage room at the back of the warehouse where his father worked. But instead of bolts of hide and bales of hemp, he saw some 24 slaves, cross-legged on the gritty flooring, a few leaning against the earthen wall, 3 asleep in the corner, and one making water astraddle the trough that grooved the room's center. God, he's so good. All were sullen, silent, naked, save the iron around their necks. As he walked through, none even looked at him. An hour, or 2 hours, or 4 hours later, he walked into that storage room again, empty. About the floor lay 24 collars, hinged open. From each a chain coiled the pitted grit to hang from a plank set in the wall to which the last, oversized links were pegged. The air was cool and fetid. In another room coins clinked. Had he been 6, or 7, or 5? On the streets behind the dockside warehouses, women made jewelry and men made baskets. For coppers, boys sold baked potatoes that in winter were crunchy and cold on the outside, with just a trace of warmth in the center, and, in summer, hot on the first bite, but with a hard wet knot in the middle. And mothers harangued their girls from raffia-curtained windows. "Get in the house! Get in the house! Get in the house this instant! There's work to do!" With spring came the red and unmentionable ships from the south, and the balls. Most things dubbed unmentionable have usually been mentioned quite fully in certain back alleys, at certain low dives, beside certain cisterns, by low men and women who do not shun low language. There have always been some phenomena, however, which are so baffling that neither high language nor low seems able to deal with them. Love that. The primitive response to such phenomena is terror, and the sophisticated one, ignoral. These ships produced their share of both, sold their cargo, and were not talked of. The balls were small enough for a big man to hide one in his fist, and made of some barely pliable blackish matter that juvenile dissection revealed hid a knuckle-sized bubble. With the balls came the rhyme that you bounced to on the stone flags around the neighborhood cistern. I went out to Babra's pit, at the crescent moon's first dawning, but the thanes of Garth had covered it, and no one found a place to sit, and Belam's key no longer fit, and all the soldiers fought a bit, and neither general cared a whit if any man of his was hit. The rhyme went on as long as you could keep the little ball going, usually with a few repetitions, as many improvisations, and when you wanted to stop, you concluded, "And the eagle sighed and the serpent cried for all my lady's warning." On warning, you slammed the ball hard as you could into the cistern's salt-stained wall. The black ball soared in sunlight. The boys and girls ran, pranced, squinted. Whoever caught it got next bounce. Sometimes it was, "For all the mad witch's warning," which didn't fit the rhythm. Sometimes it was, "For all mad Olin's warning," which did, but no one was sure what that meant. And anyone with an amphibric name was always in for a ribbing. For one thing was certain, whoever done the warning had meant no good by it. A number of balls went into cisterns, a number of others simply went wherever lost toys go. Wow, great sentence. By autumn they were gone. He was sad for that too, because by many days' practice, on the abandoned cistern down at the alley end behind the warehouse, he had gotten so he could bounce the hall higher than any but the children half again his age. The rhyme lingered in the heaped-over corners of memory's store, turned up, at longer and longer intervals, perhaps a moment before sleep on a winter evening, in a run along the walled bank of the big Cora on some next summer's afternoon. A run in the streets of Kolhari? Those streets were loud with the profanity of a dozen languages. At the edges of the spur, Gorgic learned that Voldreg meant excrement-caked privates of a female camel, which seemed to be the most common epithet in the glottal-rich speech of the dark-robed northern men. But if you used the word inni, which meant a white gillyflower, with these same men, you could get a smack for it. In the Alley of Gulls, inhabited mostly by southern folk, he heard the women, as they lugged their daubed baskets of water, dripping over the triangular flags, talk of Nivu this and Nivu that. in their sibilant, lisping way, usually with a laugh. But when he asked Mieza, the southern barbarian girl who carried vegetables and fish to the back door of the Kraken, what it meant, she told him, laughing, that it was not a word a man would want to know. Then it must have something to do with what happens to women every month, yes? He'd asked, with all the city-bred candor and sophistication of his, by now, 14 years. Mieza tugged her basket higher on her hip. I should think a man would want to know about that. She stepped up the stairs to shoulder through the leather curtain that, when the boards were removed for the day, became the Kraken's back door. No, it has nothing to do with a woman's monthly blood. You city people have the strangest ideas. And she was gone inside. He never did learn the meaning. Well, he really just dumps you in it. That's like a really, it's a fast-paced world building, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But so far, I love the writing. I always love his writing. I'll just read to the end of this first chapter. He never did learn the meaning. The lower end of the new pave, so called now for 100 years, was one with the dockside. Along the upper end, male and female prostitutes loitered, or drank in the streets, or solicited, many from exotic places and many spawned by old Kohari herself, all with different dresses and personalities, all with stories astonishingly alike. Kohari Port was home to any and every adventurer. Adolescence spent roaming its boisterous back streets, its bustling avenues, with its constant parade of strangers, taught Gorgic the double lesson that is, finally, all civilization can know. The breadth of the world is vasty and wide, nevertheless movement from place to place in it is possible. The ways of humanity are various and complex, but nevertheless negotiable. 5 weeks after Gorgic turned 16, the child empress Inelgo, whose coming was just and generous, seized power. On that blustery afternoon in the month of the rat, soldiers shouted from every street corner that the city's name was now, in fact, Kolhari, as every beggar woman and ship's boy and tavern maid and grain vendor on the waterfront had called it time out of memory. It was no longer Nevèrÿon, which is what the last dragon-bred residents of the High Court of Eagles had officially but ineffectually renamed it some 20 years back. That night several wealthy importers were assassinated, their homes sacked, the employees murdered, among them Gorgic's father. The employees' families were taken as slaves. While in another room his mother's sobbing turned suddenly into a scream, then abruptly ceased, Gorgic was dragged naked into the freezing street. He spent his next 5 years in a Nevèrÿon obsidian mine, 100 miles inland at the foot of the Faltha Mountains. Gorgic was tall, strong, big-boned, good-natured, and clever. Cleverness and good-nature had kept him from death and arrest on the docks. In the mines, along with the fact that he had been taught enough rudiments of writing to put down names and record workloads, they eventually secured the slave a work-gang foremanship, which meant that, with only a little stealing, he could get enough food so that instead of the wiry muscles that tightened along the bony frames of most miners, his arms and thighs and neck and chest swelled, high-veined and heavy, on his already heavy bones. At 21, he was a towering, black-haired gorilla of a youth, eyes permanently reddened from rock dust, a scar from a pickaxe flung in a barracks brawl spilling over one brown cheekbone. His hands were huge and rough-palmed, his foot soles like cracked leather. He did not look a day more than 15 years above his actual age. Love it. It's been a while since I picked up a Delany book. Some cool cover art here too. Yeah. And that's going to do it for this one. Let's go ahead and do a quick wrap up and we'll get out of here. Alright guys, just a little recap here. We had Between Epic and Dream, Gustave Moreau, the collected poems and plays of Rabindranath Tagore, and Tales of Nevèrÿon by Samuel R. Delany. And kind of splurged on the Gustave Moreau book. This was, I think, $65 from Abe Books total, but seems in really nice condition for one of these art books, which I've never owned before, so I'm totally satisfied. This is just $8, and this one was $9. And all of these seem to be in really nice condition, except for this writing in it, but I don't really mind personal notes as much as I mind underlining. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. If you're still with me, I appreciate you checking it out, and I hope you found something that might have interested you. Until next time, happy reading.